Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 95 of On the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi Lai, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And I'm Sébastien Bell, and I'm the associate editor at AutoTrader.
And he's back again!
Again! You can't keep me off your screens.
I feel like you have been on this podcast for like a quarter of this year, for like the last quarter of this year.
Yeah, truly, honestly. It feels great. I love being on the podcast.
I think it's a lot of fun to have you here.
It's so much fun to be here. And last episode was very fun. And all I'm going to say, spoiler alert, this guy is pretty good at guessing the prices of things.
Apparently, and I'm terrible at it, apparently. I think I only got 2 right out of the whole game. But we are back from Christmas holidays. I hope you guys all had a wonderful break that was restful and peaceful and all that good stuff.
Happy holidays.
And... wow, what a year it's been.
Yeah.
The pause was so poignant.
So with the year ending, we decided to do a look back at what happened in 2025. And, because I am the associate editor and I do a lot of the news on the website, we thought that I should take a look back at what has happened this year. And it was a tough year. It's
been a very stressful year for Sébastien because he does the news. And every day there's like press releases that come in all the time. And especially when in the beginning of the year, when the Canadian government basically said like, hey guys, there's no more EV incentives. And everyone was freaking out about it. You were like huffing and puffing at your desk. Like every time a new press release would come out, every time a new lobby or group of people had a statement, you had to cover that.
Totally. Well, I think that one of the difficult things about that kind of story is that one of the obvious things that we're always trying to do, like whether it's a review or news, is like, what's the obvious question here? How can we answer it? And unfortunately, with a lot of stories this year, because they were so wild and because there was so much going on, it was like, I know that the obvious answer is like, what's going to happen? The obvious question is what's going to happen. And the answer is, I don't know. And also no one knows.
And things keep changing.
Yeah, and things keep changing. So it was really hard. And it is a very frustrating story to be like, tell me if it's coming back or not. And like, there's just nobody with the answer and nobody's willing to give you the answer. So it's a stressful position to be in as a news writer because you're just like, no, I want the answer.
Yeah, because in the end, like, again, we're trying to make car stuff simple for Canadians. So it's like, if we don't have answers, like, how are we actually going to help people with this,
totally,
right?
Yeah.
And instead of adding to the confusion.
Totally.
And as so often is the case with so many of these like very political stories, and this was like an extremely political year in the automotive industry.
Totally.
And typically, like, we don't really cover that much politics in our world because we focus on consumer relevant things, like things that are relevant to people buying cars.
Totally.
But this year it was like, whoa, everything changed this year in the automotive industry, what it meant for industry, what it meant for consumers, what it meant for us as people who cover the industry.
Absolutely.
Very, very challenging year.
Yeah. And like everything is politics, but yeah, as you said, capital P politics is generally not what we cover. But this year, it started off with a bang on January 14, where we just like had to, because the government of Canada, that's when the government announced that they had run out of money for the IZEV, which is the Incentive for Zero Emission Vehicles program, which is ZEVs count electric vehicles, EVs, but they also have plug-in hybrids because they're partially zero emission, and also hydrogen vehicles, which don't matter. But that's not true, they do. But they're a much smaller portion of the pie. So the government announced that it was running out of money, and then so soon afterwards, they announced that they had run out of money, and that pretty quickly led automakers to announce their own incentives for vehicles. And like, these were big incentives and a major part of people's purchasing decision, because the federal incentives were worth up to $5,000.
Yep.
And the provincial ones on top of that, if you live in a place where they are offered, like, take a significant chunk of the price off of an EV, which is very important for a new technology because it makes it more affordable. Because EVs don't have the economies of scale. They haven't had the time to get into as many production facilities to be as affordable as internal combustion vehicles. And also, like, we're just figuring it out. Getting batteries is hard and expensive. And automakers have to pay for all of the research and development that has gone into making a brand new type of vehicle. All of which is to say that it was pretty disruptive to the EV industry when the when the incentive for zero emission vehicle program ended. So it didn't end. It got paused because it ran out of money, which is like, as was expected. It was always expected to run out of money in March of this year, or when it ran out of the $2 billion, I think, or whatever, however much it was that was in the pot for people to take from. The problem is that it happened to end just as the Trudeau government was falling apart, which meant that there were a whole bunch of questions. The government wasn't in a position to be answering them. And also, there was an election coming. The Liberals were trying to find a new leader. And also, everything in the world was going on.
It was a very chaotic time.
It was a very chaotic time. So it was, again, this is the situation in which I was like, okay, there's a very obvious question. Will it come back? What is the intention even? Like, I don't even care about like what is actually going to happen. What is the intention? And people were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And it was very hard to find a good, solid answer. And like, sure, people were saying that it was their intention, but like the ISEF program is controversial. It is a lot of money that is going to people who can afford to buy cars and vehicles, which are expensive. So like it is in some ways like not a popular program for people at either end of the political spectrum.
Right.
Because if you're conservative, you're like, this is a waste of money. But if you're like really left, very like NDP or whatever, you like there are a lot of very important programs that need funding and for people who don't have as much. So it's like a difficult program, but I will say that I think that it is an important program all the same because like we all breathe the air and local air quality is important.
Yeah, I mean, we all know, like, the science is telling us that we need to stop driving internal combustion vehicles.
Yeah.
I don't think we're not arguing with that.
Yeah.
And I think anything that helps make this technology more affordable for regular people is going to be important.
Very important.
So this year was very crazy for me because last year we finally started to see things even out from the COVID pandemic days, right?
Yeah.
When prices were sky high, inventory was super low.
Totally.
And so we were just starting to get things more normal again. And then this EV incentive came, or it ended. And we saw a brief spike in sales for EV because everyone was like, oh no, I got to get this EV now while I can still get the incentive.
Totally.
So we saw a little spike. And after the incentives ran out, it just took a dive, right?
Yeah, totally. It was pretty impactful. And even by March, the reports were coming in that February sales for zero-emission vehicles had fallen 3% in BC, 14% in Ontario, and 21% in Quebec in the immediate aftermath. And the latest sales results are also that the ZEV market is really struggling because all the cars are suddenly more expensive. Like and also the provincial incentives were also going away, and Quebec has come back, but the incentives are smaller now. So like while federal incentives were drying up, so were provincial incentives. So for some people, like prices for an EV suddenly went up by tens of thousands of dollars. And like no matter what car that is, if like, you know, if you're spending $35,000 on a Civic and next week it's $45,000, that's like a different purchase. So that makes a huge impact.
Yeah, so the year started off real strong with that news.
Yes. And on top of all of the like sort of local Canadian politics that were going on, it also occurred roughly at the same time as international politics were kicking off and the US decided that it was going to impose tariffs on Canada.
Thus starting the whole trade war, you know, this whole elbows up mentality. I feel like it really brought Canadians together in a way that like we haven't really seen very much of before in terms of like being so patriotic.
Certainly. I can't think of a time in my life, in a period in my lifetime where there's been this much like commonality of purpose and so many people are like on the same, like everybody I know is being like, well, we got to buy Canadian. And like, that's not a thing that I've always known, you know, in my life. So it's really interesting. And for cars, that's very complicated. It
is very complicated. So Canada has or had a very strong automotive manufacturing sector.
Yeah, totally.
It made a lot of sense for both markets, actually, to produce vehicles here.
Yeah.
But once Trump came in and imposed tariffs, starting this trade war, It made things very, very difficult for you covering the news, but also for just like consumers who are buying vehicles.
Totally.
And in a time where like everything is already getting more expensive,
Yeah.
this really didn't help matters at all.
No, absolutely. And like, it's one thing to be covering a news story like like the incentives story, where you can sort of tell that there are well-meaning people who are just like, they can't answer the question for you. And that's frustrating in one way. But the tariff one is just like, it's a dumb program.
Mhm.
They didn't think it through. Like they on top of like, yes, Canada had 25% tariff imposed on it, but like other countries also had huge tariffs imposed on them. And like it wasn't that well thought through, because wasn't there an uninhabited island that had like a 41% tariff on it? And it's just like, okay, so like you just were picking names out of an encyclopedia and being like, 25.
Yeah,
35.
but then we learned that like these tariffs were not helpful for Canadians, but they were also not helpful for Americans,
No.
whom it was designed to protect.
Yes.
Right, and that was the whole confusing thing about this, is because people on both sides were suffering because of this.
Yeah, and so the tariffs went into effect in April, and like almost immediately, Stellantis started laying people off, and there were temporary plant shutdowns in Mexico and Canada. They cut 900 jobs in the U.S., so it was like immediate action. And as we covered at the time, one of the big reasons for that is that every time any parts that go into vehicles go across borders multiple times, and sometimes 3 borders at a like, from Mexico to the US to Canada and
back again.
So like all of a sudden you had to like figure out, okay, do they have tariffs every time they go over? And if they do, like that's devastating for the parts industry. It's devastating for automakers, and indeed, like
and for consumers, because who has to pay that cost? Most of the time, it's the person at the end, which is the consumer.
Totally, and yeah, absolutely, prices were rising, and like we pretty quickly saw plants like Honda, they were reconfiguring their production, and although overall production stayed the same at Honda's plant, like they had to think really hard about like what they were producing in Canada, and they really had to like change production to be the really volume markets here, and then move production of vehicles that were going to the States to the States. So that was really complicated. And it wasn't just like Honda, like Stellantis Stellantis didn't shut down a plant, but they were supposed to build the Compass in Brampton,
right,
Ontario. And they announced that as part of like their plan for the US, they moved that production to the US, leaving the Brampton plant with like nothing. So now they've spent all this time getting ready to have production come here, go to Brampton, and like all of a sudden the rug was pulled out from under them. And a similar thing happened at Chevrolet's plant, where they were producing the Bright Drop. It's like a delivery vehicle and an electric delivery
one, yeah.
And so like not only had they been hit by this sort of general worsening of conditions for electric vehicles, but also tariffs, because Ontario was the only production site for the Bright Drop. So they had to pay, all of a sudden this delivery vehicle that's very much sold on price had another big increase in prices as it was going to the States. So they had to shut down production here. And these are still questions that are being answered about what's going to happen. Canada is suing Stellantis because of all the incentives that were given to the company to make things here. And like it's had a big impact on a lot of Canadians. It's already had a big impact on the industry. And obviously, like we're still sort of figuring out how pricing is increasing. But like in a time when going into the year, even in 2024, affordability was a big deal. Having all of these big geopolitical issues increasing prices is like a big difficulty for consumers.
Yeah, and especially because like we're only a year into this, right?
Yeah.
And it's still unfolding. So things are still changing. You know, when we were covering this, we would record a podcast episode and then like literally when we went home, there was new news about it.
Totally.
So things are always changing, and they will be changing, I imagine, for the next 3 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, and who knows what's gonna happen next. And like if the reasoning is not sound for this kind of thing, which is like that drugs are coming over going to the US, like which is just incorrect.
It's not true.
How do you predict? Like that's such chaotic behavior. How do you predict? But anyway, so the tariffs and the lack of incentives have both conspired to cause our third sort of major news theme for the year, which was that like the EV market has been really impacted by what's been going on.
Yes, and it's sad for us to see because it was on such an upswing, right? Like it seemed like people were finally getting on board. At the same time, I think they became like even more politicized than they used to be.
Totally.
Elon Musk didn't really help matters with his like chaotic behavior this year either.
Totally.
But we were feeling like EVs were on an upswing because the technology was getting better.
Mhm.
The prices were coming down.
Yeah, totally.
Even though they're still more expensive than like gas powered vehicles, but they were getting closer.
Absolutely.
So price was becoming less of a drawback for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Which again disappeared when the incentives went away, and then the tariffs happened.
Yeah.
And so the result of that is that we saw a lot of automakers pull back on their initially very ambitious EV plans.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So Volkswagen said that it wasn't going to sell its electric sedan, the ID.7 here. Honda said that it was postponing the construction of a plant to build EVs here. That's going from 2028 to 2030. Fingers crossed.
And they discontinued an EV that's only been on the market for a year.
Yes, the ZDX is just gone. Yeah. So, yeah. And like same, Ram announced that the 1500 Rev, which was the electric one, will now be the plug-in hybrid one. But like they're not doing that. They canceled a high-performance version of the electric Charger. They canceled the plug-in hybrid version of the Gladiator. And like that's not only incentives. Part of that is American EV subsidies also falling there, and also environmental policy changing there quite dramatically. So, like, yeah, it's really impacted the EV industry. And I will freely admit that at this point in my research, looking back through the news stories, I was feeling pretty depressed.
It comes through in the writing, I guess. It's hard not to.
But I will say that as I was looking through the year, there were also a lot of EVs that were announced this year. So like the EV has certainly been impacted. The industry has certainly been impacted, and the market is worse off than it was a year ago. But we're still getting, Volvo is still bringing the EX30 and the ES90 soon. Kia is also bringing an electric pickup truck. Lexus unveiled the ES that will be either hybrid or electric. The Toyota CHR was announced. The Toyota BZ Woodland.
Right. And the trend for a lot of these is that now we are getting more EVs that are designed for a price point.
Yes.
There's a lot more affordable EVs coming, which is so important in this time.
Yeah.
And that's really good news. And so it does seem like we're taking a step backwards, but the progress is still slowly moving forward. I think originally when all the automakers were like, oh, we're going to have a full EV lineup by 2030. Now we're like, lol.
Yeah.
They're like, not really. And so they've just pulled back on their plans, but that's not to say they've abandoned it altogether.
Exactly. And like I said in the episode where we were talking about products that we're looking forward to, like I think that this is a generation 1.5 of modern electric vehicles. And I think that we're really benefiting from that. And that the inertia that has come with what's been going on is leading to really good EVs that are built to a price point and that will be like affordable. There are more $40,000 EVs now than there were ever. So it's really exciting.
And even though EVs are not as popular as they once were, I think the need for more efficiency is still being felt by a lot of people. And now we're getting a lot more hybrids.
Yeah.
And a lot more plug-in hybrids, and any step that gets us closer to that, I think is good.
Yeah, totally.
Some people will say it's not good enough, but I think we have to like take what we can at this point. And if there are more hybrids available than like flat out just gas vehicles, like that's good too.
Yes, absolutely. It's certainly moving the needle in the right direction. And
yeah, and not even just for efficiency either. Like we're seeing like performance hybrids now. So it's like no longer just like a crunchy, hippie climate change thing. It's like if you want, a 911 that's a hybrid, it's like way faster than the one that's not a hybrid.
Yeah,
right?
totally. And like that would have seemed unthinkable 10 years ago.
Exactly.
And I do think that what we accept as a hybrid and like what we just expect from cars is changing and becoming more and more electrified. And like, yeah, so there's still reason to feel positively about it. But yeah, certainly it's not all bad news, but certainly it took a hit this year.
Right.
Changing speeds a little bit. Pun intended.
I see what you did there.
We also did a lot of coverage on speed cameras this year, which was a really weird story that kind of cropped up in Ontario specifically.
Yeah, this was a very Ontario-specific story. And I will add to this bike lanes as well. I think bike lanes and speed cameras for this province specifically were a major story this year.
Totally. And just to announce my bias off the top, I was at the some of the cycle protests. I was riding down the street with people. I am a fan of bike lanes. I'm a cyclist, but also
you're also a driver.
As a driver, bike lanes are better, and bike lanes get more people off the road, and that's better for everybody. That's better for drivers. That's better for cyclists. That's better for pedestrians, and it's just safer for everybody. So, so that was a big deal. Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, seemed to have a real hate on for anything that wasn't automobiles. His name is Ford. Maybe he's just But yeah, so on July 17th, he just sort of seemingly randomly waded into the debate on speed cameras, which I wasn't sure why.
I mean, it's weird because it's not a provincial issue. This is a municipal issue, right? And so for provincial politicians to be getting involved in such weird granular things is what are you trying to do? I thought it was a distraction tactic, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on why this was such a big deal for people.
So I think that it is understandable why people are annoyed by speed cameras.
They don't like fines. I get that.
I don't like a fine either. It sucks when you get nabbed by one. Bummer. But so there is a speed camera specifically on Parkdale, which is along a very big park in Toronto. It is a safety zone, but it is also a 4-lane street, so people go quite quickly. And the speed cameras were introduced because all of Toronto, but this area in particular, were having safety issues and pedestrian deaths. And the pedestrian death statistics in Toronto are depressing. So installing speed cameras, as we know from all scientific study on the topic, and also just what we see, what is intuitively correct and what is actually correct, they help slow traffic down, which is safer. And so days after Doug Ford waded into this debate for no reason, the CAA released a report saying that 73% of Ontarios are broadly in favor of speed cameras. And yet, for some reason, a few months later in October, Doug Ford announced that he was killing all of the speed cameras in the province and taking them all down. And so now we don't have them in Toronto anymore.
And the whole argument was that it's a cash grab. But okay, don't you think it's more of a waste of money because we spent so much money installing these and now you're just going to take them down?
Again, this is a constant frustration that I have. It was the same thing with the LCBO thing where he broke the contract early, costing the province millions of dollars. And for what? For why? Because he didn't. Anyway, not to go on too much of a tangent. But yeah, the same thing here. They were installed and then they were taken down. That's a waste of money. Also, if you want any speed control now, you need to have cops on duty.
And that costs money.
Which is expensive.
More expensive than cameras.
Yes. And as Dan pointed out in his article, in his opinion piece about it, the amount that speed cameras contribute to the municipal budget is tiny. It's
a drop in the bucket.
It's very small. And it doesn't make sense. And it's so all of the arguments don't really make any sense. And the arguments against speed cameras don't really make sense. They are an effective tool in making roads safer. And it's just weird to live in a time when that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there are literally people dying because of this.
Yeah.
And our most vulnerable road users, kids, seniors.
Absolutely.
And we're supposed to be protecting these people.
We are absolutely supposed to be protecting these people. And it doesn't take bad drivers necessarily to hurt pedestrians.
Yeah.
It's
speeding happens. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you made a mistake.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But the consequences are so dire.
So serious.
That finding ways to more broadly tackle the issue is a big deal. And it's just disappointing.
Very disappointing.
Very disappointing.
It's been a very stressful year. I'm sure we don't have more like good news to go through this
Yeah.
year for 2025.
Yeah.
It was very chaotic.
It's been a very chaotic year. And sort of the last sort of broad theme that we had was just a sort of a more industry theme. And it was that sedans, more specifically large sedans, have been taking a beating.
I'm not surprised.
No, absolutely.
The segment gets smaller and smaller every single year.
Absolutely. And I do think that large sedans in particular are vulnerable to crossovers because like you're buying a bigger car, so why not go bigger still? But yeah, this year we lost the Acura TLX. We're fairly confident we're losing the Lexus LS, the BMW M8, although that's a coupe, but close enough, is also going out. The electrified Genesis G80 is going out. The Lexus RC, RCF, they're all going away. Cadillac is the only one that decided to switch it up and do a compact sedan with the CT4, but they're keeping the CT5. So
right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So the thing about, I was talking to Barish, who is our VP of Data and Intelligence and Insights or something like that. And he was saying that he has, in 2025, seen a lot more interest in used sedans because there is so, the selection in the new car market is so small.
Right.
And a lot of people in this time where things are very expensive, they want to save, they want something more fuel efficient.
Totally.
And a lot of sedans are just simply more fuel efficient than a crossover, right?
Totally. And and also they're cheaper than crossovers.
Exactly.
Because crossovers right now, because they're popular, have the perception of being a more premium product.
Yes.
So automakers, one of the big reasons that automakers liked them is because they can charge more for them.
They're more profitable.
For what is effectively
the same
vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like maybe costs a marginal amount more in material, but like doesn't offer that much more to the customer.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was an interesting kind of sub-note or like a little, a little, I don't know. The used car market and how it reflects what's happening in the new car market, always very fascinating to me.
Totally. And I think that it is the first place you go to when you can't find what you're looking for in the new car market.
And the good news is that like the prices on the used car market have stabilized from the post-pandemic craziness.
Oh
so that
goodness,
there is some good news in 2025.
News.
If you're looking for a used car, like it's a good time now to buy one.
Yeah.
Although the inventory is still not as strong as it was pre-pandemic, but the prices aren't as crazy. So, things are leveling out, which is good news.
That's great.
And before this week's Ask an Expert, here's a message from your friends at AutoTrader. We at Own the Road love making car stuff simple for Canadians, and the AutoTrader app does the exact same thing. Sign up for price drop notifications, find out how much your car is worth, get an instant cash offer from a vetted dealership, get all your expert advice, and more. Download the AutoTrader app today. This week's Ask an Expert comes from Paul. He asked a question that I think a lot of people are curious about. Why do most car dealers charge a customer an exorbitant fee to purchase a car at lease end?
That's a really great question.
Great question, Paul. So the answer to this has a couple different facets, right? So first of all, dealers see lease buyouts as a lost sale because you're not buying a new car.
Because you're not going into a new car.
And they see it as lost inventory.
Because you're not giving them your old car.
For a cheap price that they can then resell to someone else,
as
right? So they're
pre-owned.
losing out on two different income streams here.
Okay.
So they basically have to recapture that lost money elsewhere. How do they do that? Charging you fees.
Yeah.
And that was especially true during the pandemic when, inventory was very, very low.
Yeah.
They would be buying used cars for a lot of money and selling them for even more.
Yeah, there were all kinds of people who like telling stories of selling their used car for more than they bought it for.
Exactly, even though it was like 5 years old or whatever.
Yeah.
So people were going really nuts with that. So that's one reason why there's a lot of fees to buy a car at the end of your lease.
Okay.
The other one is that the country and most provinces, they don't have any regulation on the type or a cap on the types of fees that dealers can charge consumers.
Okay. So it's fully up to consumers to. That sucks though because you're kind of stuck with who you can go to.
Exactly. There's not a lot of options for consumers out there if you're going to buy out a lease, right? And so provincial regulators don't have any caps. Like in Ontario, for example, they have OMVIC, and they regulate advertising and all-in pricing for new cars and used car purchases.
Okay.
But lease buyouts are not considered either. They're considered a finance contract.
Okay.
So due to that, dealers can charge whatever they want.
Right.
In terms of fees, processing fees, safety inspections, admin fees. They can basically make up almost anything they want to try to recoup that lost income, right?
Oh, so they can pull all of those tricks
because there's no regulation
because there's not enough regulation. Okay.
The good news is that I think if you're a good negotiator, you might be able to haggle on some of those fees. I think most people don't like negotiating, which means you're kind of stuck.
Right. And it's also a difficult position to negotiate from because you don't have that much leverage. But
exactly.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, I think fair enough. And if we know anything about dealers, is that they are there is flexibility in pricing.
Yeah. And so I would say if you're in the situation where you're trying to buy back your vehicle at the end of your lease, there are things you can do. Just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I think if you are a savvy consumer and you see a whole bunch of fees you don't like, just simply ask them hey, can you explain this?
That's right.
Is there something we can work out? What if I come here to do my service all the time? Do you mind knocking off some of these fees?
Those are great ideas.
Besides that, you might want to lobby at your provincial regulator to maybe introduce some kinds of consumer protections on these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are kind of the reasons. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. It's just, you just gotta ask a lot of questions, I think, and if you feel like you're not getting a good deal, you're fully welcome to question them on that,
Totally.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your question. We hope it was helpful. If any of you have any questions to ask us or suggestions for episodes or anything like that, you could email us at expert@trader.ca. But that rounds out this episode.
And this year. Happy New Year.
Thank you guys so much for your support this year. It has been a chaotic year, but we wouldn't have been able to do this show without you guys. So I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you so much. Drive safe, and we'll see you next year.
Next year.